Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Moneyline MMA coming at you, Nick and Jose here to discuss UFC Sao Paulo coming at you guys Saturday, November 4th. Prelims starting at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. So even though this is a fight in Brazil, they aren't too far off on the time zones within North America, and therefore we will get fights returning to us this Saturday after a bye week. Like I said, 5 p.m. Central with the prelims. It'll most likely be 9 p.m. for the main card. That could move depending on fights being canceled. But regardless, this fight card is headlined. Jailton Almeida versus Derek Lewis, who had to be a late-ish kind of replacement. I don't exactly remember how many days. The fight was scheduled with Curtis Blades, and Curtis Blades sustained an injury, had to get replaced by Derek Lewis. This fight is occurring in Brazil, as I mentioned. So on just about every single fight on this card, in fact, not just about, it is a fact. Every single fight on this card, there are 13. Every single one of them includes at least one fighter identifying as Brazilian. Obviously, in the main event, that fighter being Jailton Almeida, absolutely decimating his UFC competition so far. Just to quickly recap for you guys that may be new to the show, Jose and I bring you guys our 5 most confident picks from this fight card of the main event fights. That being said, we have 5 weights. The 5 weight is the most confident pick. The 1 weight is the least confident pick, which gives you guys an idea of not only us giving a pick, but how confident are we in said pick. So we're going to go with our most confident to our least confident selections of Saturday afternoon. And starting as always with my 5 weight pick of Saturday afternoon, we're going to start with the main event. We're just going to do it. The fight is one of the biggest odds discrepancies on this card, as Derek Lewis is a very heavy underdog. Probably of surprise to almost nobody. Derek Lewis accepting this fight with less time to train, and he's coming off a big, huge win. KO'd Marcos Rogério de Lima, but we all know what Derek Lewis brings to the octagon. He's either getting submitted, getting knocked out, or administering a knockout. There are 3 options to conclude a Derek Lewis fight, and those 3 are pretty much your options. There has not been a Derek Lewis fight go to decision since 2020. Just saying. Therefore, it would be wise, in my opinion, to take this fight within the distance. No doubt about it. Whether you think Almeida or Derek Lewis is going to win, they will win within the distance. Derek Lewis knows, and so does Jailton Almeida, that one strike could very easily end this fight. And that one strike will unlikely to be coming from Jailton Almeida. Derek Lewis should be able to come in here and, in his mind, swing and bang, right, in his words, until Almeida is knocked out. Almeida has the wrestling advantage by far, and I anticipate him to use that. And I think Almeida, he's also a big dude. There's not going to be any size advantage for either guy here. And I think Almeida, maybe not have the power, but I think he's going to be able to dominate in his own way in the striking department, just with crisp, clean boxing, and then using his wrestling to take down Derek Lewis. I don't even really think it's going to be close. So 5 weight for me, Jailton Almeida. Jose, what do you have?
Yeah, Nick, so I agree with you. I have Jailton Almeida as well. He is my 2 weight, and reason is that Derek Lewis, he just has that knockout power. It just, any given moment, he can just lights out. He can just get his ass whooped the entire fight, and then the last 10 seconds, he's the type of guy to just, knock you out. He's not afraid to get hit. But of course, with that, he has been finished recently a few times already, both by knockout and submission. And his last fight against Rodrigo de Lima, to be honest, who knows how that fight would have gone if he didn't, surprise him with that jump start, flying knee and then ground and pound, to get that quick finish. If he didn't do that, the fight could have actually gone a different way. he was riding a 3-fight losing streak and got finished in all of them. So I do agree with you that this fight will not go the distance. I have Almeida for sure. And again, I think overall he's the more well-rounded fighter and just overall going to win. For example, his most recent win over Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I had Jairzinho Rozenstruik taking that win because he is a feared striker and he has power. And beating him, I thought meant something, and not so much too, because people argue like Jairzinho Rozenstruik has kind of gone downhill since the Francis fight, which is true. Before Francis, he was an undefeated, unstoppable machine, and then Francis just lights out quick, and then since then he's literally been win loss, and obviously he follows a loss to Jay and Almeida, but still, Jairzinho Rozenstruik's striking is nothing to lack on because he had a long, extensive kickboxing career too. So the fact that Jay Almeida was able to not be afraid of that and go in and secure a submission win over Jairzinho Rozenstruik shows a lot in his game planning and maturity in MMA. And so similar with Derek Lewis, he just needs the game plan right and avoid that knockout power from Derek Lewis. And Derek Lewis is not as a fast striker as Jairzinho Rozenstruik. So I agree, Jay Almeida will probably most likely initiate the takedown and start working for a submission. I definitely would have Jay Almeida getting a submission, but I have him as my 2-weight. Reason being is, again, Derek Lewis, he's, you take him down, he also gets back up, and he just is very strong, and I know he's probably going to be wanting to come back and do something flashy again. And he, for a heavyweight, for a big guy, he moves pretty well, as we saw in his last fight too with that flying knee. He's pretty quicker than what people think. So if he wins too, if Derek Lewis wins, I think it's either going to be something last minute or really just to catch you off guard out of nowhere quick in the first round. So that being said, I have Jay Almeida as my 2-weight.
Gotcha. So we do agree, man, but not necessarily quite as confident on your end of things. And I think you make some good points. I think I was exactly going to highlight the same scenario, the same fight with Jairzinho Rozenstruik to show that Jailton Almeida is ready to go against anyone, and no matter the power they have. I thought Almeida used the exact game plan that was necessary for him in just getting the takedown and just going. I mean, he had 3 minutes of control. He ended the fight within 3 minutes and 43 seconds. And in that amount of time, he had 3 minutes, 9 seconds of control, meaning it took him about 30 seconds to take down Jairzinho Rozenstruik and impose his will. And I just honestly see nothing in Derek Lewis that's going to be able to stop that. Derek Lewis does not have a major size advantage. He's not overly athletic in his ability to sprawl, and he's not going to be very aggressive if you get on his back. I don't think Derek Lewis is getting back up, to be honest. So if Jailton, maybe he doesn't submit Derek Lewis, but I think for sure he's on his back for the entire round, and he could even get, similar to what Khamzat against Usman round 1, a 10-8 kind of thing. So although I don't think that's very likely at all, as I said in my first little segment, that I think this is ending within the distance. I think there are going to be a lot of fireworks, so I don't anticipate Almeida to just sit on his back and make it a long, drawn-out fight. And even if that occurs in round 1, I'd still be willing to bet round 2 they are like, screw this, and they just go for it. Maybe Almeida gets back on his back and Derek Lewis is too tired, didn't have a long enough camp, and gets choked out. Who knows? Maybe Derek Lewis overswings and Almeida maybe doesn't get like a huge power swing, but clips him enough to knock him over and get a club and sub, something along those lines. I really think those are all very likely outcomes. I love Derek Lewis. I don't want him to lose, especially as an American dude. I feel like he represents America in some way. I want Derek Lewis to win. The true UFC fan and true American in me wants Derek Lewis to win, but I can't give you guys a pick that I think is wrong. I really think Almeida is just going to be the next kind of thing in the UFC. We'll see what happens with this John Jones and this interim fight now between Tom Aspinall and the Polar Bear and this and that, and they're saying they're going to rebook John Jones versus Stipe next year, but we'll see if that even happens. So the heavyweight belt is going to be a whole thing for the next year, it looks like. But regardless, Jailton Almeida could be the next name to really get thrown in that list as an outsider if he continues to fight like he has. And to be honest, I think this matchup suits him perfectly. As well as my last point, he is at home. So commonly, I feel like almost every time the UFC hosts a card in another country or a specific area like Mexico, or they do Mexico night or whatever it is, right? The nationality they're celebrating is always showing out that night. It's like three quarters or better. You could almost make a parlay with all Brazilians and have a pretty decent shot. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's Brazilians in every fight, so I'm not recommending that at all because one's definitely going to end up losing, but a vast majority will end up winning. And I just think it's advantageous for the UFC to do so, knowing that the hometown fighters have a great chance to win. So,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah,
go
so
ahead.
yeah, I definitely agree that that home crowd advantage, I think, is definitely a big, I think a boost for sure, and then especially the Brazilian crowd, they're gonna show up, and I definitely know the Brazilian fighters for sure are definitely not gonna want to disappoint. So that's the thing about this fight too, is just like it's the heavyweight division, almost anything can go, but I think on this one, I think I'll agree with you for sure.
Sounds good. Let's move on to your five weight.
And then for this one, my five weight, this is the welterweight bout between Gabriel Bonfim and Nicholas Delby. Right now, Gabriel Bonfim is my bad,
Big favorite. Huge
big
favorite.
favorite, minus 590,
Yeah.
while Nicholas Delby is the plus 390 underdog. That says it itself. He's a big favorite. He's my five weight. He's undefeated. Most of his wins, kind of like Almeida as well, is similar fashion. Majority of them via submission. And but unlike him, he's a lot younger and undefeated. And I think a win here could we can see a real guy that's gonna like contender that will be making his way up the ranks, especially a win over like Trevin Giles most recently. Trevin Giles, when he came to the UFC, people thought he may be like one of the next biggest things, and I still think he has it in him. He's only 31 years old, and Trevin Giles has won and beat the who's who. He's beating like Ryan Spann and Brandon Allen back in the day, and as well as he's come up short obviously right now to Gabriel Bonfim. So I think the fact that Gabriel Bonfim was able to defeat someone like Trevin Giles in his third UFC fight, I think that's really impressive and says a lot. I think his age and athleticism definitely is why I have him over Nicholas Delby. Nicholas Delby is 38 years old, and I will say though, it will not be easy to submit him because Delby's never been submitted in his MMA career. So, and again, like I said, Gabriel Bonfim, out of his 15 wins, being undefeated, 15 of those wins 12 of them come via submission. And I don't know if he's going to be able to secure a submission on Delby. So I think this is definitely going to be like a fight where he's going to show a little more than what we've seen in the last few fights. I think we're going to definitely see his striking more in this matchup. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little more on the feet. I expect him to pretty much not get the submission right away. If he does get it, I think it'd be later in the round, maybe in the late second to third round. But I can see him just winning this one pretty much by decision. I think this is going to be his biggest, not his biggest test. He's definitely going to see. I think Trevin Giles, to be honest, was a tougher matchup than Nicholas Dalby will be. So the age difference, him being undefeated, and matchup-wise, stylistically, I think Gabriel Bonfim is an obvious choice. Even again, he's mostly a submission guy, but even in the UFC, the fights that he's been through right now, he's thrown a high volume of punches. Right now, he's landed over 6 significant strikes per minute, which is more than Dalby's 3.93. Again, Dalby's definitely been in the UFC longer, but I definitely expect Gabriel Bonfim this fight to actually pick up the striking department and show us a little more something that we haven't seen before. I think this one's probably going to go down as a unanimous decision win for Gabriel Bonfim. What are your thoughts on this fight, Nick?
Interesting. No, I have let me check. I got my 2-weight on Bonfim. So we agree. It's actually got kind of funny how we have a reverse flip there where we agreed on our two biggest weights, but our picks were on the 2 weights. You had 2 on Almeida and I have 2 on Bonfim. And to be honest, it's hard, man. I really think for me, this is a pick where I think Bonfim can get the job done, but I'm a lot less confident than you are for a few reasons, and one is what you highlighted, right? Dalby's never been submitted in his professional career, and I thought it was interesting that you mentioned that Trevin Giles is a more tough opponent or a bigger test. That I can't say I agree with. Not that Dalby is like worlds better than Trevin Giles. I think Dalby definitely has more experience at 26 professional fights, with a whole lot of them. It's something like 10 or 12 of them in the UFC. And he hasn't beaten anybody that impressive, right? So that's why I'm still picking Bonfim to win. But I was very impressed by Dalby's recent performance against Salikov earlier this year and got the unanimous decision win. I think Dalby's definitely a little older, but he proved earlier this year that he can still get the job done. And considering that Bonfim's like, butter in his like go-to, his primary is a submission, I'm just not sure he's going to be able to. In fact, I'm pretty confident he's not going to be able to just go in there and take Dalby down and have impose his will like he's been able to. I do believe that Bonfim is one of the next big prospects of the UFC, and I think he can still get the job done striking. You highlighted his striking differential, and it's a really solid one. I don't think he's fought anyone currently that's a top-level striker, but going back to Dalby, he's not really either. He's only got a slightly positive striking differential, so it's not like he's levels up. But I really think we're going to be seeing Bonfim's dog get tested here, as he's not going to be able to go in there and impose his jiu-jitsu will. And I think he's going to have to prove to people that he's going to stand up and box it out if he's got to stand up and box it out. And with a small size advantage of 2 inches, I think Bonfim gets the job done as my 2-weight pick. Just not as confident. And I also have one last caveat, that Dalby at plus 390 to me is robbery. I think that is a great line with someone that has as much UFC experience as he does, coming off of as good of a win as he got against Salikov. I understand he got taken down twice, but in the end, he had 6 minutes and a half of takedown control time, and Salikov only had 55 seconds. So he very clearly dominated a lot of those wrestling exchanges too. And yeah, that being said, I just think plus 390 is an extremely interesting bet to make. I would recommend against putting Bonfim in your parlays.
Oh, okay. Interesting, yeah. So you against the parlays? No, I hear you.
But I still pick Bonfim. I still think, like I said, if I had to make the pick, I have some confidence he's going to get it done, just not that much.
No, I got you. No, I hear you. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I guess maybe not like maybe not to sound like me. I was praising Bonfim too much, but yeah, Dalby. All praise to Dalby too. Yeah, you're right. His last fight against Muslim, he definitely looked great getting a unanimous decision win. And this could be a learning lesson for Bonfim too. And he can probably get schooled and lose unanimous decision. This is a fight I definitely don't know if it will be finished within the 3 rounds. That's what I think. I think one of these guys is going to actually take a unanimous decision win, or even split.
Yeah.
Regardless, I don't know. I just don't see any of these guys being finishing each other. I don't see Dalby really putting out Bonfim and Bonfim submitting, or even putting out Dalby. Both guys haven't been finished like that. So that's the way I view this fight. But
I like that.
Like you,
dude. I like that. If anything, maybe we can start thinking of like, how do we put together parlays that aren't just money line bets, right? We don't have to pick a fighter. We could say Bonfim versus Dalby to go the distance. Simple as that.
Yeah.
We could say, and then we could also say Almeida versus Derek Lewis within the distance.
Yes.
And if we really wanted, to put that home, I mean, I know you had less confidence in Almeida, but Almeida to me is pretty live. So we could even say Almeida within the distance plus Bonfim versus Dalby going the distance. I bet you get some good odds, which even just that 2 leg. You could probably get like plus 150 maybe plus 100, which is nuts because both these guys are minus 500 money lines.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
saying.
So
Just saying.
that definitely, no, good. Yeah, good catch there, man. Yeah, definitely something I'll start. Definitely, we should look more into. Yeah, when setting those parlays for sure.
So, yep, that's a little tidbit for everybody else. Let's move on to what my four weight of Saturday afternoon is going to be. And we're pretty much just, this is unintentionally, but kind of funnily, conveniently, moving straight down the roster from first to last to first, I should say. Bringing up to you next the feature bout of Saturday afternoon and another heavyweight bout for Saturday afternoon. This is Rodrigo Nascimento versus Don'Tale Mayes. And I've heard Don'Tale Mayes kind of described as like the layman's Derek Lewis, and it's kind of hard to disagree, I guess. Don'Tale Mayes definitely has KO power. He's KO'd his last two opponents that he got a win against, but he's also lost via decision to Augusto Sakai and an overturned fight. I'm not really quite sure what happened there against Hamdi Abdelwahab, but he ended up not. It ended up being turned into a no contest. Don'Tale Mayes has fought Rodrigo Nascimento before and gotten himself choked out. And I get that fight occurred multiple years ago at this point, and it's not really, in fact, it'll be like 3 years and 5 months from the fight day. And to be honest, I don't think it's that like I've said it in previous shows. I'm not going to value something that happened that long ago. I think 3 years is like the borderline of relevancy. And honestly, it just kind of gives me more confidence in Nascimento because I personally don't think Don'Tale Mayes has really evolved a whole lot since then. And that's what I'm really looking at, right? If two guys have fought in the past and they're fighting again, what has changed? Because the fighters have changed, right? They're different human beings. We all change over time. We learn things, we experience things, but the matchup is the same. Like the first thing that comes to my mind is the Pantoja versus Brandon Moreno rematch that happened like 5 years apart, and I'm one of the few who had Pantoja to win that fight as the dog, and it ended up working out because you kind of just have to see how these guys change throughout time. They're not going to be the same fighters. And, for part of the reason, I think that's why people had Moreno, because they thought he had changed. He was now the champion and Pantoja wasn't. But people failed to realize Pantoja can also change, in which he did. And I just really think the same kind of goes here with Nascimento and Don'Tale Mayes. And I think in this case, Don'Tale Mayes did not really improve. Since then, he did get 2 wins in a row. But then he's gotten a no contest, a loss versus Augusto Sakai. He's only kind of beaten the bottom end, the cut level, the cut rate heavyweights of the UFC. I don't think he's beaten anyone better than that. I guess to Nascimento's downgrade, neither has he. Tanner Boser is probably his best win, but it was split decision. Alir Latifi, another split decision, and the dude's old as hell. I just think the main advantage here is that they've fought each other before. And I think Don'Tale Mayes is not going to have any new game plan. Nascimento knows what to expect, and he'll get the job done. Jose, what do you think?
Yeah, so for this one, I got Nascimento, but unlike you, I actually did I am saying I did weigh in their last fight of him beating Dante, even though it was in 2020. I still think that's somewhat a little relevant, but it is almost it is definitely 3 years now. So, but that is just something, just because like given the history, I definitely am viewing them. I'm seeing both guys definitely have matured since that fight, racked up wins, both over bigger names like even though Andre Arlovski's just still fighting, which is ridiculous, but that's still just a name to have on your resume. And then Nascimento beating Lair Latifi as well. Granted, that was split decision. That being said, Don'Tale, it is very possible. Yeah, like it can go either way. These are the big guys. But when it comes down to it, Nascimento. I think overall he is the better striker and he's the better grappler. I think it may go down again as another submission. It's heavyweight, so this is one too. I don't see going to decision, even though Dante he actually has gone to decision quite a bit, at least 3 rounds. both guys have had their fair share as the most, and then Nascimento winning via a split decision his last 2 fights. What are the odds him doing that again a third time? I don't think so. I think it's going to be another submission win for Nascimento. Pretty much to be straightforward about that one. I feel pretty strong that he is my 4-weight. But again, it can go either way. It's the heavyweight division. He can possibly get knocked out. But I feel strong enough just given the history of how these two fought and how both have looked since too. Both guys have not looked, they both gotten better since they first fought. So because of that, I'm taking Nascimento as my 4-weight.
Yeah, fair enough, dude. Thinking about it, I think if you're going to side with Mays, going back to how I said earlier that it seems like he's kind of just a discount Derek Lewis, I think if you're going to go Mays, you have to go Mays within the distance. I really don't think... Isn't that true, though? Discount Derek Lewis. Yep, that's you might as well. The DDL. You might as well print it on your shorts and everything. Don'Tale Mays, man. He will get the KO or he will lose, in my opinion. I think Nascimento, I like your thought about him getting the submission. I think also Nascimento is live for a decision win. I think those are the 3 outcomes. And I'll take the 2 out of 3 really from those 3 outcomes. I think it's most likely to happen there. So looks like that might be our best lock then, considering 4 + 4 is 8 in terms of overall confidence for money line.
Yeah. So that definitely is one. I guess we already covered enough. So
yeah,
I guess
let's go to your 3.
Move on to my 3-weight, and this fight is between Rodolfo Vera and Armen Petrosyan at middleweight. Right now, Rodolfo is actually right now I'm seeing it on
even.
Dead even. Both are -113 on FanDuel as we speak. So it is a close one. For this one, I'm going with Armen Petrosyan. The reason being is he himself has just looked phenomenal. Yeah, both guys 9-2, which is crazy. But I think Armen Petrosyan is the better striker for sure. Vera being the better grappler. I think Armen Petrosyan, he has some takedown defense. He's not the best, but I think he's gonna do enough to get by. I think for a fact we're not going to see Armen Petrosyan initiate any much of the grappling against Rodolfo Vera. I definitely see Rodolfo Vera trying to close the distance and put Armen against the cage and try to engage him through there. Rodolfo Vera's also got phenomenal takedown defense. Everything regarding wrestling and grappling, Rodolfo Vera has. And so that does make it a risk, though, for Armen to possibly get caught and get choked out. And he's never been submitted, but it is I think possible. Out of his 9 wins, he has 6 KOs. So I don't know if he can actually knock out Rodolfo Vera as well. So I do see it why this is such a close fight between the two. And Rodolfo Vera, he has a fight over Cody Brundage, and Cody Brundage, he's been pretty up and down too. I used to think he was going to be a bigger threat in this division, but Rodolfo Vera also lost to Chris Curtis, and that was unanimous decision. I can see Armen Petrosyan again either winning by unanimous decision, or if not, possibly giving Rodolfo Vera his first TKO loss. What are your thoughts on this fight, Nick?
Man, I have a one-way on Rodolfo Vieira. I think I was fascinated to see your thoughts and hear your thoughts on how it might play out. I think Petrosyan is an amazing boxer. I think his striking differential is very impressive. 5.97 to 3.03 is very impressive. I think one thing I look at, even against look at what he was able to do against RoboCop. Doubled his significant striking output, got the split, but it was still split decision. RoboCop gets 2 takedowns, gets some control time, some submissions attempts, and I really think it's shown a couple times. Then his next fight against Caio Barajo, another fighter on this card, if I'm not mistaken, he is on this card, fighting Abus. on the main card here. And Kyle Barajo, 10 minutes control time, 4 or 5 takedowns landed, and that was his path to victory against Petrosian. Even AJ Dobson, 3 takedowns of 3, just didn't make anything happen. I think it's been shown that Petrosian's weakness and his downside could be getting taken down and dominated that way. This is going to be, I believe, to be a smaller cage. Maybe I'm wrong, but typically when it's not pay-per-view, it's a smaller cage. Although since it's in Brazil, it might be a normal size cage. All I'm trying to say is if it's a smaller cage, that benefits Vieira, because I think Vieira can clinch and get to the submission attempts a lot easier that way. So that's the main thing I'm looking at here, man. I think Vieira, his last 2 wins in the UFC have been by submission, in between his loss to Chris Curtis via decision. And I just don't think Petrosian can match Chris Curtis stand up. Maybe I'm wrong about that. That'd be an interesting matchup to see. But regardless, I think Vieira gets the job done via submission, but I'm not as confident.
Okay, yeah, so then going with Vieira to submission, definitely, I definitely understand just again him being just overall the better grappler. But yeah, Arman, like, yeah, I think he's the better striker and Vieira's the better grappler. So this one, yeah, I feel he's my and I guess Arman, yeah, he's my middleweight, and it just because how the next ones line up, but I guess that's what I got to say for that one. This is one we'll both have to agree to disagree on. He is my 3-weight, so so he's in the middle for me right there, and it's almost like a 50-50. Like men is like almost the same as the money line, and you have Vieira as your 1-weight. So this is one we'll agree to disagree.
Yeah, I think that's the first fight we're disagreeing on too for this card. So, but it's not too confident. I mean, it's your 3-weight versus my 1-weight, so it's not is like my 5-weight versus your 5-weight, which has happened in the past. It's always fun.
Yeah.
So that being said, we got one more fight for you guys because we have actually discussing the fact that Kyle Barajo is on this fight card. We're going to discuss his fight next. Kyle Barajo versus Abus Magomedov. What an interesting matchup. I think this is a great job. This is one of those fights that is like looking at this card, I was like, this might not be the greatest card. And then I saw this fight and I was like, wow, they actually did a great job with these matchups in my opinion. Kyle Barajo is like definitely on the up and coming. He's ready, like middleweight division wise. He's definitely trying to get into the top 15, top 10, and start to become like a real name. He's coming off multiple wins in the UFC, never lost yet in the UFC, and Abus is coming off a loss against the champ. He gets 1 win in the UFC, and then it was a knockout win in round 1. And then he loses to who wasn't the champ at the time, but is now currently the champ, Sean Strickland. I know, I can't remember what your pick was, Jose, but I remember being at a concert that night. But the show we had the week before, I picked Sean Strickland to win. And it was actually, I think Sean Strickland was the underdog, if I'm not mistaken, for that card. Which, thinking back on that, can you believe how crazy that is? Now that he's the middleweight champion, to be the underdog against a guy that was really an outsider. He only had 1 win in the UFC against a decent fighter. Don't get me wrong, Dustin Stoltzfus, but that's nothing crazy. But to be honest, man, without beating around the bush, my 3-weight here is on Abus Magomedov. I think he's going to be able to bounce back in and get the job done. Part of the thought for me here is value as well. Kyle Barajo right now is minus 280. Abus is plus 210. To me, that is extremely good odds on a fighter as good as Abus. He is kind of a well-rounded fighter. I think his stats on UFC stats are very skewed because it's only his 2 UFC fights being considered when there were 7 strikes landed in his knockout win against Stoltzfus. So, of course, his striking differential looks like garbage when it's really only considering his fight against Sean Strickland, where he kind of got dominated as bad as Izzy did. But even Izzy almost got knocked out against Strickland. Probably should have. I really think Abus is a very well-rounded fighter. He's got 14 KOs and 6 submission wins on his record through multiple organizations, the PFL, KSW, and now the UFC. I think he's going to be better than a lot of people realize when not fighting the UFC's best. Nothing against Kyle Barajo. He's on the up and coming. We haven't seen him lose, but this is his biggest test, in my opinion, but pretty much by far. And Kyle's really going to have to use, in my opinion, he's going to have to do takedowns and wrestling here to get the job done like he did against Jay Chuck in his last win earlier this year. He'll have the crowd on his side. It makes me nervous to put my money against someone that isn't on the Brazilian side here in this card. But I got to say, to me, Abus has some insane value. Jose, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you on him having that insane value. It is a tough matchup for him. He is the underdog too, and to some part of it too. Rahul he's the real deal for sure. He hasn't faced his big names yet, but I think this is gonna be a tough challenge for both. As a matter of fact, I actually have Abus as he's my one weight. I think he's gonna get it done. He's the better striker, I believe, in this matchup, and just him being the underdog. I just saw I like yourself. I saw a lot of value in it because it's definitely a winnable fight for him. And even like that last fight when he went against Sean Strickland, he looked good for at first, but he just really gassed himself out after that first round. And Sean Strickland just keeps the same pace and pressing forward. So that's something that for how long Abus has actually been fighting, that's just something he's still learning and like dealing with now. So I'm hoping that's something that he's definitely adjusted to and not trying to be too explosive and just let out the entire gas tank in the first round. He's definitely to secure this win. He's definitely going to need to be a little more patient. And yeah, he's definitely going to. I think he's going to have to accept the fact that he's going to have to deal with some takedown pressure that Rahul is going to put on him. He's the better grappler, but I don't think he's that much better like overall. Like I think it's going to be definitely enough for Abus Magomedov to withstand and even probably show off a little more of his own grappling. This one, I think Abus will probably take by decision. So, but Rahul himself, he's legit. So, Abus is definitely my least confident pick, just because how Rahul too, how phenomenal he's been looking. He hasn't lost since 2015, which is crazy. He has one no contest in 2018, but other than that, he's been nothing but just racking up those W's and multiple different ways, like you mentioned, like KO, submission, and decision. He's been getting the wins pretty very well rounded, was opposed to a boost. He's mostly a KO artist. I'd be surprised to see him knock out Braho as well. A lot of these guys that they get a lot of their knockouts before coming to the UFC, then here it's like they start going for the first time into the third rounds. So I think this is definitely gonna be a fight that is gonna make it to the third round. Abus has been in the third round. Both guys have made it to 3 rounds in the past. So I think this is gonna be another one where it's gonna come down to decision. And I think Abus will take the win. I'm just not that confident though too at the end. So he is my one weight for that reason.
Gotcha. Yeah, pretty much. So we do agree. You're a little less confident than I am. I think Abus is going to really bring it to Kaio here. If Kaio doesn't show him respect, I think Kaio's going to get rocked and have to show him respect or a desperate takedown attempt or something like that. So we'll definitely see come Saturday afternoon. And otherwise, that concludes the 5 picks from Moneyline MMA this week. There is one more fight currently slated to be on the main card, but usually the UFC will switch stuff around. So there's 5 fights on the main card unless no fights are canceled, which seems to be kind of rare, especially now that we're seeing 2 heavyweight fights on the main card. A lot of times the heavyweights are the most, I would say, the most common culprits of not hitting weight. Or at least taking forever to make weight. So we'll see if that becomes a factor on Friday for these weigh-ins. Otherwise, Ismail Bonfim is fighting Vince Pitchell. Can't believe Vince Pitchell's even still in the UFC fighting at 40 years old. Might as well chalk it up to a Bonfim Brothers parlay, to be honest. So that being said, they must have like some sort of deal with the UFC, like, hey, if you want Gabe to fight, you got to put Ismail on the card as well. Can't do anything but respect it, I guess, as brothers. And they're not even in the same division anyway, so they don't really have to worry about fighting each other. But that being said, enough rambling. Those were our picks for this afternoon. Thank you guys for tuning in. We will, of course, be back at you guys next weekend. The UFC, after this past weekend off, is going to be bringing some heaters coming. In fact, UFC 295 will be the week after. So a week from today, make sure to come back at around 5:45 to 5:30 to 5:45 Central Time, and we will be discussing the light heavyweight vacant belt between Jiri Prochazka and Alex Pereira. Of course, this card was supposed to feature Jon Jones, who has now been removed from the card due to a torn pec. Saw the video, didn't look good. Jon Jones going to need to take at least 8 months to recover for that one. We will be lucky to see him fight in July of next year, in my opinion. That being said, Sergey Pavlovich is now fighting Tom Aspinall for the interim belt, which doesn't really mean anything because now the UFC's confirmed that they still want to fight Jon Jones versus Stipe next year. So then what? Then who's the belt holder? Because Jon Jones was always the champion. Was he forced to relinquish due to injury? Who knows? Also, one of my favorite fighters, Diego Lopes. Let's go, Lopes. Got to see him fight in Nashville earlier this year, and we will get to see him fight Pat Sabatini. That being said, thanks again for watching, and make sure to tune in next week for that episode.